Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. Thank you for coming back to this channel. If you've been here before, if you haven't, thank you for being here for the first time. Here at Veteran Lane, we're going to talk about VA disability. Our ultimate goal has always been to make this VA compensation process, VA disability process, much smoother between VA and veterans as we educate uh, everybody who watches and everybody involved in the claims process. So, as always, I'm your friendly VA credit attorney, Matthew Lane, here with another topic, and it's a topic that we've actually talked about probably more than once by now in the videos, but we're going to keep talking about it. Why? Because this topic I find continuously is getting worse in the errors that we see coming from the VA. Now, keeping in mind, I understand I'm seeing the bad and the ugly of the VA. That's my job. So, there are times where these errors aren't happening and claims are getting granted properly, which is outstanding and wonderful to know. However, again, seeing the bad and the ugly, this is a huge problem, and our reason for denials are reliant on these inadequate exams and opinions, for which we will talk about some more. Now, before I get into that, I want to address maybe the elephant in the room at the moment. No, not the missing purple shirt. But the idea that we're faced with another government shutdown. Now, this is the third one I've experienced in my career working with the VA realm, two within the VA and now one outside. It is definitely something that I feel is really hard on the system. It's really hard, especially veterans for your claims, and it's definitely difficult on the VA employees who are dedicated to getting you those benefits that you rightfully deserve. I'm going to have to put out there, or I feel I need to at least, veterans, please be patient with those VA employees who are still sticking it out, may not ever get paid for the work that they do. Hopefully they understand the right thing to do is grant those benefits when they can and only deny when they must, even if morale may be low right now, even if they don't get paid for that work that they do. Because I do recall one of the shutdowns, at least that I was involved in, I was told to come to work not knowing if I was ever going to get paid. I may end up doing a bunch of free work, which sounds really, really like a big problem. I don't think we'd allow anybody to, even in the corporate world, to never pay their employees. But that was the direction we were given. There was even a point in time where individuals at a higher rank than me were sent home and being told they weren't essential. While we were being told we were essential. In the end, the issue was, for me at least, was that those who were sent home and did no work still got paid their full salary, and those who worked still also got paid. But it was the idea that no one knew what was going to happen for certain in the end. So veterans, just kind of work with us. We're still open here. We're working around all the issues and the problems. Even if we can't find points of contacts because they've been sent home, or even if they get sent home later down the road here, we're still here for you, and we're going to do everything we can to, again, work around the issues at hand. Now, VA, again, I don't have any words of encouragement except for that hopefully that this comes out to where you do get paid for the work that you do, and that you hang in there and continue to remember the mission is the veterans here and their families. All right, so let's talk about this topic here. We're going to talk about these VA exams again and the inadequacies of them, the medical opinions as well. So we're going to cut through some of this confusion again. We're going to break down some of these most common and legally significant errors that the VA makes in the compensation claims, errors that lead to these direct denials. These errors usually start at the compensation and pension, the C&P level of the exams. They get compounded by the decision makers who then rely on these inadequate exams, unfortunately. So by understanding the flaws is our first step to having a successful appeal. It's also a first step of making the benefits process smoother with VA and veterans alike. So again, we're covering critical errors from the examiner's biases to the decision maker knowingly using bad evidence. So let's dive into where the system breaks down. Let's first look at the VA examiner errors in conduct. The VA exam is where most problems originate. As I've kind of already mentioned, that we've done this topic multiple times, and we're going to keep doing it because it's one of the highest errors, if not the highest error altogether. So the examiner and being examiner, in this case, often a contractor, has a single job to do. And that's to gather sufficient information, veterans, for the VA. But here's where they often fail. Error number one, failure to review the claim file, also known as the C file. So examiners have a duty to review all relevant evidence, including veterans, your service treatment records, STRs as we know them, your private medical records, and most importantly, your lay evidence, your personal statements, your buddy statements. If that history is in your C file and the examiner missed it, the resulting opinion is legally insufficient. So from experience, your C file, veterans, is supposed to be sent over to these examiners. They're supposed to review the entire C file. I remember being trained to tab things and highlight things and send that, make sure the examiner seeing those items. So the law has really set out to the idea that it's a presumed the examiner has reviewed the entire file. There's only a checkbox to say that they reviewed the file on these DBQs. Now, there's other spots to discuss that evidence and look into that. And that's usually where we find that even though they check the box, where we find that they actually didn't review that evidence because it's not stated, it's not noted, it's not in the rationale. So these are things that we'll look for on our side, veterans, when it comes to reviewing your claim for strategy on appeal. So just to kind of give you an idea, we'll see that evidence not discussed, not considered, even though it said that it was reviewed. Now, how about error number two? The naked conclusion is what I'm going to call it. Now, this is when an examiner offers a medical opinion without adequate reasoning. So, for instance, they might state the veteran's condition is less likely than not related to service because there's no documentation in the STRs. Well, that's a conclusion, not an opinion. A legally sufficient opinion must provide a logical, well-articulated rationale, referencing the specific records they reviewed and addressing any conflicting evidence. Now, that example kind of goes into another error that the courts have said is automatically an inadequate opinion on the reliance of no documentation in the STRs. Because again, remember, STRs is not the end-all be-all. There's other evidence that needs to be considered, including lay evidence for the time in service, after service, and so forth. So the idea that the examiners get away with just putting a conclusionary statement or a series of them and not actually providing a logical, well-articulated rationale leaves that medical opinion inadequate underneath the law and thus should be kicked back and not used in the decision. Here's a popular one we get to, error number three. I see this one probably quite a bit, and I should probably put this number one. We will find that the examiners ignore medical literature. So veterans and VA, keep in mind that this is an opinion just based solely upon one examiner. The examiner is supposed to be making educated opinions based upon the medical community at large. And in order to do that, they're going to have to know what the medical literature is. So the idea that these examiners don't know what this medical literature is can lead into this common problem. So this is usually what we see as a common mistake in their statements. And they may state something like this: there is no medical literature supporting a connection between, say, X and Y. This happens in cases involving environmental hazards, typically is what we see. We also see it in secondary conditions as well, and a lot of rare conditions. So here, veterans, this is where if you have a representative, you want to get with them, and they can point to the respective medical studies and peer-reviewed journals like we do to the VA and go, look, even though your examiner said there was no literature supporting it, that's an inadequate medical opinion because there is plenty of it supporting that connection. So the examiner has failed to address all the available medical science and the medical community's opinion at large, and has only given, well, what they know offhand or don't know in this case. So what about the examination itself? So we see inadequacies in the examination. We even hear from you veterans that we serve on this side of some of those inadequacies. So this happens when an examiner rushes. They fail to perform objective testing required by the specific DBQ, disability benefit questionnaire. This may be when they dismiss subjective pain complaints. So veterans, if your exam was 5 minutes long, which we hear that so often, 5 minutes long and you weren't asked about key symptoms, that exam is likely insufficient. And those are things that, as a representative, we can document to your file and make request of a new examination and hope that the veteran or the VA actually honors that examination for us. Now we also have error 5 here, improper conduct and bias. So this is less about the medical findings and more about procedure. And this is something I've heard multiple times from veterans as well, which is very concerning. Veterans, if an examiner tells you at the exam, directly tells you at the exam, you can't be service connected for this condition, or the VA won't approve this, something along those lines, they're overstepping their role. Their job is to examine and document, not determine the final claim outcome. They are working in the medical realm, not the legal realm. They are not allowed to make the legal decisions. This conduct suggests improper bias and can be grounds to challenge that exam itself. And I promise you, as your representative, we will challenge it if that exam comes out in a negative manner and you were told that biased statement by the examiner during the exam. Because again, they're not supposed to be overstepping. That does create an inadequate examination. So let's talk more about some more flawed medical opinions. So even if the exam is conducted properly, veterans and VA, the written medical opinion can be fatally flawed still, making it a poor basis for a denial. So we've kind of talked a little bit about this. It's the idea of missing facts. So the examiner might state a fact that is simply wrong. They might write the veteran began seeking treatment for back pains 5 years after separation, except for the facts of the case, veteran, is that the back pain shows in your STRs and that you were seeking treatment while in service. Maybe even just 6 months before you got out. So if the VA decision maker relies on the incorrect factual premises to deny your claim, veterans, the denial in itself is erroneous. If it doesn't apply, if the opinion doesn't meet the facts of the case and the evidence of the case, should go back. VA should go back. And I understand some of the concerns there about the production points you get and why sending it back may hurt your overall job performance. But remember, these are the rules, these are the laws, and these are the things that we're supposed to make sure are done right in order to help the veterans. Here's another big one, ignoring the aggravation element when it comes to secondary. So this is crucial for secondary claims. Veterans, if you have a service-connected condition, say like diabetes, that causes a non-service connected condition to worsen, say peripheral neuropathy. Now this may not be the best example. Maybe I should change the example to PTSD and sleep apnea. So let's say you're service connected for PTSD and that it may not necessarily cause but aggravate sleep apnea. Well, we know that's all in the medical literature. We know that that connection is plausible. But what we find is the examiner doesn't explicitly consider whether your service-connected condition is aggravated by the secondary condition beyond its natural progression. They'll usually say there's no causation. So if the examiner only addresses the direct cause and effect and ignores the aggravation, the opinion is insufficient, according to all the rules, laws, and courts that are involved here with their opinions, because there are two elements to secondary: causation and aggravation. Now, we also find that the VA's manual does not require even the VA to address the aggravation correctly, and actually talks about more of the proximate causation effect, and the DBQ that's drawn up asking the question seems to fail to ask the aggravation question. So this is likely, from what we're seeing, the reason why this secondary opinions always come back inadequate, or nearly always inadequate, at least for the bad and ugly we see. So veterans, keep that in mind when you've got a secondary claim in there, especially if you have a rep, they should catch this, because the whole bunch of us are aware of this problem and the VA has not fixed when it comes to requesting secondary exams. All right. Failure to address conflicting evidence. We see this quite often as well. And we also see it work in the opposite way incorrectly. But let's try this way. So veterans, you might have a favorable private medical opinion. The VA examiner must weigh and specifically address the conflicting evidence. Now, we're going to assume that maybe that opinion isn't adequate for VA rating purposes in this case. Because one thing we do see is that VA is supposed to weigh the medical evidence that is adequate for rating purposes and ultimately not get that VA examination if it's not needed, but we'll see them do it anyways. So let's just say in this scenario that veterans, your favorable private medical opinion missed a few points, but it conflicts a little bit with the VA examiner who ultimately was trying to give an adequate opinion requested by the VA. So if they fail to explain why they found your private doctor's opinion less persuasive, veterans, in that VA examination, the VA decision maker cannot simply ignore it. Again, the VA examiners have to look at all the evidence of record. So if they ignore evidence of record when they draft their opinion that conflicts with your private medical opinion, well, it's an inadequate exam, as we've discussed a little bit before. Now, let's move into the VA side. So dedicated VA employees, I'm going to touch on some of the errors that we see from your side, and the majority of them that we see from the bad and the ugly when it comes to, well, improper reliance on these exams and these medical opinions. So this is where the VA claims processors and rating specialists drop the ball, unfortunately. And it's by relying on the flawed evidence, as we've discussed. So here's error one, we'll call it, for this category. Relying on a legally insufficient opinion. If an opinion suffers from any of the defects that we've covered and so many more that we did not touch on, that the law says is inadequate, say a lack of record review, a naked conclusion, misstatement of facts, well, the VA rater or the decision review officer has a duty not to rely on that inadequate medical exam or opinion. They must find that the opinion is legally insufficient and send the claim back for a new adequate exam. As I mentioned before, VA, gotta send it back. That's the rules, that's the way it goes. And yes, you have to defer that back down to have that BSR do that. And yes, your production points may suffer on that. But you're not there for your points, you're there for the veterans. So keep that in mind. You gotta send it back. Relying on it and denying it only causes me now to send it back to you and causing you more work in the end, and other individuals like myself and representatives sending it back to you. Error number two for this category, knowingly using an inadequate exam to deny. So again, the most egregious error is when the VA knows the C&P exam is deficient, but uses it anyways. And this is very similar to the last one. So let's say if a rater points out in the reasoning that the examiner missed a key record or that the exam was conducted improperly, but then concludes with a denial based on that very exam, they've committed an error. The VA cannot use defective evidence as the sole justification for a negative decision. We see this a lot of times. We will find that, and again, it was in the training that I went through as well, copy and paste of that medical opinion, which is so clearly insufficient, will be pasted in as the reason for denial. And well, that's what we're talking about here. You clearly have used an inadequate exam, especially if you don't explain the weight of that and the probative value of that exam to decide, well, this is the reason why we used it. So knowing the exam is inadequate, copying and pasting it over as your reason leads to an appeal because you've relied on, again, an inadequate exam VA at this point. So those, again, they come back to you and we end up with this circle of work. So as it looks like your backlog is cleared, it may not be because it's just in another realm and being moved around in circles and coming back to somebody else. So I guess in a way you're blue falconing your buddies because they're getting the work that you decide not to do correctly. Keep it in mind. Just keep it in mind. We just want to do the right thing. We want to make this process easier by doing the right thing and understanding the rules and laws. That's really what we're here talking about. We also have the failure to justify discrediting lay evidence. So, veterans, your personal statement about the origin, severity, and impact of your disability, that's evidence. As we mentioned before, it's evidence. Even the VA examiner needs to take that into consideration. So let's say the rating specialist decides to discount or discredit your lay evidence. Well, they must provide clear and convincing reasons supported by the record in order to do so. They must explain why they rejected your credible statements, and failure to do so is a reversible error. So CVA, dedicated VA employees, when you put in just those conclusionary statements, or you just copy and paste the VA medical opinion that doesn't address those lay evidence, and you don't address that lay evidence, we've got a double error really now happening here. And again, it's got to come back. It's got to be worked again. So we appeal. Veterans, it's another reason to appeal. So I've given you a few different things here, veterans and VA. We're going to, again, keep talking about this issue because I've seen it continuously get worse. I know it was the #1 issue for a long time when I was in the VA. But ultimately, veterans, I want you to know that if your claim was denied, don't panic. We're just going to help you do another claim. We're going to file another appeal, or we're going to file your first appeal against that if you have representation. Now, again, you can do the same on your own if you choose. But if you seek out a VSO or accredited agent or accredited attorney like myself, you're going to find that we can support you a lot more, make those arguments, find this stuff a lot faster for you, and make these requests for the VA to correct the errors that they have. So, again, what we talked about, veterans, if you want to look kind of in your own decisions when you get them, before you file that other claim, you want to really ask yourself, did the examiner ignore medical science? Did they fail to consider aggravation? Did the VA knowingly use a bad exam to deny? Now, it may not be the easiest for you to point out or find in your own decision, because there'll be some evidence that we'll have, as your representatives, access to, where we can actually read it better, see it all, and understand more of what happened there as well. But it's something to look for. Look for that copy and paste. Look for the lack of explanations, and look for just the fact that it's only conclusionary statements. Those would be a good start for you. Because this is ultimately where your strategy is going to begin when it comes to appeals, veterans. I'll even give that little secret away. The first thing I really want to look at is your decision. I want to know what the VA wrote. Now, with all my experience, I'm going to get in their heads and their mind and understand why they likely did what they did. And we're going to go ahead and go after the appeal with the legal arguments and explaining the rules, trying to add that additional education in there the best we can. And we'll definitely point out the more egregious errors that look like major training issues to us, to the VA in the process as well. Because again, we're all here for the same mission. We just want it all to work the way it's supposed to. So with that, I'll leave you with this. Veterans, understand again, we're here to help, veteranline.com. We are a small team, but we have a lot of experience behind us and do everything we can to get you the benefits you're entitled to. Now, there may be times that when I'm looking at the evidence, I decide that we're unable to help. You got to understand the evidence has to meet the elements of the rules and laws. So we will discuss that. We'll go through that. We're going to look at VA. We're going to look at those errors. When the veteran comes to us, we're going to look at those errors. We're sending you the appeal. And I'd like to keep it as short as I can, but unfortunately, I find I'm writing 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pages of errors trying to explain everything that's missed. So keep an eye out. Take pride in your work. Know it's for the veteran. Just do the right thing. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week in next Tuesday's video. Yeah, thank you again. Have a wonderful day.